I wasn't planning on going to the hospital that night. I had just come home from a walk, soaked in summer sweat, ready to unwind and maybe make dinner. But then I saw the missed calls. One from my boyfriend, 2 from Mom, a voicemail, a text. Your dad needs to go to the ER. And just like that, everything paused. I grabbed a banana, threw on a hat to hide my unwashed hair, and drove the short mile to pick up my father. He was waiting with a box from the Mayo Clinic and instructions I barely had time to read. His hands were shaking. Mine were too, but I couldn't let him see that. What unfolded that night was a journey many of you may know too well when a parent's health begins to fade, when roles reverse, and the child becomes the caregiver. This is not just a story about a hospital visit. It's about what it means to love someone who no longer remembers the details, but still remembers how to love. So, if you've ever sat in a hospital chair at 2 a.m., clutching your parent's hand, this story is for you. Let me take you through that night. 1 hour, 1 father, 1 daughter, and a quiet kind of love that speaks louder than words. The phone call that changed the night. It started with a buzz. I had just come through the door, shoes still on, heart still beating from the summer heat. I was reaching for the kitchen faucet when I noticed the blinking light on my personal phone. Missed calls, 2 from Mom, 1 from my boyfriend, a voicemail, a text. I didn't even have the phone with me on my walk. I leave it behind sometimes to breathe, but the work phone always stays in my pocket, just in case. I carry it like an anchor. I hit play on the voicemail. Mom's voice trembled, not in panic, but in that tired way parents sound when they've been holding something together for too long. It's Dad. He hasn't been able to go to the bathroom for hours. The memory care. Folks said we need to take him in. Can you drive? My stomach tightened. I didn't have to think. I just moved, toweled off the sweat, changed shirts, threw on a hat, canceled plans with a friend in a text that said only can't. Emergency with Dad. No time for makeup, no time for dinner, just a banana grabbed on. Instinct. Something to keep my hands busy, my jaw working, my nerves slightly in check. I was out the door in 5 minutes. It's funny how we always think we'll have time to prepare for moments like these, that we'll recognize the turning points when they come. But they don't arrive with fireworks or warnings. They come as a text message from your mother when the sun hasn't even set. And as I pulled up to Dad's place, I saw him waiting at the curb with Mom holding a small cardboard box and a stack of papers. I knew without anyone saying it that I was now the adult in the room, the one who would drive, who would speak for him, who would shoulder what came next. Sometimes the moment your life changes isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's the sound of your father stepping into the passenger seat and you quietly buckling him in. Chaos in the heat, the dash out the door. There's a strange clarity that settles in when you're moving fast for someone you love. I wasn't thinking about traffic. I wasn't thinking about the ache in my legs from the walk or the sweat still clinging to my back. I was thinking about Dad, how he looked the night before, tired, but still cracking jokes, still calling me kiddo. Less than 24 hours ago, I had driven him home from the same hospital, and now, here we were again. The sun was still hanging low, casting long shadows across the sidewalk as I pulled up in front of his place. He was there, slouched, slightly eyes distant. Mom handed me a small stack of papers and a package from the Mayo Clinic. If you could ask them to do this while you're there, she said, not even trying to hide the worry in her voice. There was no time for hugs or explanations. I opened the passenger door, helped Dad in, buckled him like I would a child, and tried not to notice how small he felt under my hand. Driving that 1 mile felt like 1,000. Every stop sign, every red light felt like it was working against us. And in my head, a silent checklist had started paperwork. Medications, the lab kit. Explain to the nurses about his dementia. Ask for blankets because he's always cold. Remember to mention that pain doesn't register normally for him anymore. As we neared the hospital, Dad reached over and touched my arm. "Thanks for coming to get me," he said softly. "I don't know what's going on." And in that moment, my chest tightened because I knew and he didn't. Because I remembered him carrying me through fevers and late night nightmares. Because now it was my turn. And as we pulled into the ER parking lot, I said what I hoped would anchor him. "And me, it's okay, Dad. I've got you." Arriving at the ER, a familiar yet heavy place, the automatic doors opened with that familiar whoosh, and just like that, we stepped back into a world we'd both come to know too well. Hospitals used to be places you passed by on the way to somewhere else. Now they were destinations, unplanned, unwanted, but deeply familiar. Inside, the air was too cold and too clean. The smell of antiseptic always hit me first. Then came the noise beeps, intercoms, the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes, and the occasional cry muffled by walls too thin to hold heartbreak. I held Dad's arm as we walked in, steadying him not just physically, but emotionally. His eyes scanned the room uncertain. I could tell the lighting confused him, that his memory was already slipping somewhere I couldn't reach. He whispered to me, "Are we going to the mechanic?" "No, Dad," I said gently. "We're at the hospital. Remember, you haven't been able to pee. We're going to get help." He nodded slowly, the way you do when you're not entirely sure, but you trust the person next to you. The receptionist asked questions, name, date of birth, symptoms. I answered all of them. I handed over the paperwork. I mentioned the dementia with a lowered voice, hoping for compassion. Then I said it again to the intake nurse, then again to the triage nurse. Each time I felt like I was speaking louder than I wanted to, like I was naming something he didn't want named. Memory care, dementia. He gets confused. It felt like I was peeling away parts of his dignity just to make sure he got the right care. We were led to a small room, curtain walls, one chair, one bed. I helped Dad sit down. He looked around and asked, "Where's Mom?" "She's at home," I said. "She's okay. You're okay. I'm here." And in that moment, he looked right at me, really looked, and asked, "Are you Andrea?" I smiled, my heart breaking just a little. "Yes, Dad, I'm your Andrea." And I sat beside him, holding his hand as the rest of the night began to unfold. Speaking for him, the burden of advocacy. If you've ever had to speak for someone who once spoke for you, you'll understand this next part. The nurse came in holding a small, handheld scanner. "We'll check his bladder first," she said cheerfully, like it was just another Tuesday. And maybe for her it was, but for us it wasn't. The scan showed a liter of urine. Too much. Far too long. "We'll need to place a catheter," she said. I nodded, but Dad didn't understand. And when they began, he screamed. It's one thing to see someone you love in pain. It's another thing entirely to hear it echo off sterile hospital walls, knowing there's not much you can do. I stood behind the curtain, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want him to see the look on my face. Pain, helplessness, anger, all of it. From behind that curtain, I answered question after question. Is he on any medications? Does he have a history of urinary issues? How long has he been in memory care? I answered as best I could, filling in the blanks of a life I used to only know from a child's perspective. Backyard barbecues, dad jokes, and long drives in his pickup truck. Now, I was the one with the clipboard. And as I spoke, I kept reminding them over and over again, he has dementia. Not to excuse him, but to protect him. So they'd know why he flinched when they touched him, why he got agitated when they asked what year it was, why he wouldn't answer when they said his full name. It wasn't that he was being difficult. He was just lost. And I was the map. But being the map meant I couldn't fall apart. Not yet. So I stood there soft-spoken but firm, asking for warm blankets because he was always cold, translating his pain into words, translating their medical terms into comfort. He looked at me at one point, eyes full of fear and confusion, and said, "Is this going to hurt?" I didn't lie. I just said, "I'm here." Sometimes that's the best answer we have. The memory maze. When Dad calls me the wrong name, it happened like it always does, quietly, casually, like he was just making conversation. We had a moment alone while the nurse stepped out. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Dad looked at me, his eyes soft but searching, and said, "Andrea was just here. Did you see her?" My breath caught. I smiled gently. "Dad, I am Andrea." He blinked confused, looked away, looked back, and for a second I saw the flicker of realization in his eyes that he might have gotten something wrong. But it passed as quickly as it came. Moments like these don't feel like sharp knives. They feel like dull ones, cutting slow, pressing deep. Because it's not the forgetting that hurts most. It's the moment you realize they don't know what they've forgotten. He talked for the next few minutes about people I'd never met, his twin sister. A man named Uncle Walt with 12 kids and horses a boat he rented that was somehow stacked on top of another boat. It was nonsense mostly, beautiful nonsense, spoken with certainty and pride. But in between the stories, he'd ask again if Mom was coming. He asked if she was just outside the door. And each time I said she's home, he'd nod like it was news, like it was the first time he'd heard it. Then he'd ask again. It's a strange thing, watching someone drift in and out of recognition, like waves washing over a shore. Some moments, he knew exactly who I was. Others, I was a stranger with a familiar voice. I learned not to correct him too much. I learned to follow him down the winding hallways of his memory, to listen, to respond with warmth, even when the facts didn't add up. Because sometimes, love isn't about holding on to what's real. Sometimes, it's about being present in whatever version of reality they're living. So when he talked about Andrea, the girl he thought had just left, I told him she loves him very much, and I meant it. Flashbacks from a photo, a glimpse into who he was. In my purse, tucked between a chapstick and a crumpled receipt, is a photograph I've carried for years. I don't always look at it, but I always know it's there. That night, while waiting for the doctor to return, I reached for it. It's a black and white photo. My dad is standing beside his old Ford pickup, one hand resting on the hood, the other holding a tiny girl with wind-tangled hair, me. He's young in this photo, strong, smiling like the world made sense. There's a glint in his eyes that says he could fix anything, build anything, carry anyone. And for most of my life, he did. He was the dad who built my first treehouse in a weekend because I said I wanted one, like the kids on TV. He was the man who taught me to ride a bike, even though I crashed 3 times before I got it right. He was the one who carried me to bed when I fell asleep in the back seat during long road trips, always steady, always sure. And now, I buckle him into the car. I tell him what day it is. I answer for him when nurses ask about medication. Looking at that photo, it's not sadness that hits me first. It's gratitude, because I got the best of him. I got the years when his memory was sharp, when his laugh filled the house, when he knew who I was without hesitation. This man in the hospital bed with a catheter, a trembling hand, eyes that sometimes forget he is still my father. But the man in the photo, that's the version I hold in my heart. That's the man who shaped me. I tucked the photo back into my purse just before the nurse returned. Dad looked up at me, his eyes tired. "You look just like your mother when she was young," he said. I smiled. "I know, Dad," I whispered. "She was lucky." And in that moment, fleeting and fragile, we both remembered something beautiful. The struggle with the system, missed details and cold faces. It's not the beeping machines or the long wait times that wear you down the most in a hospital. It's the repetition, the endless explaining of who he is, where he lives, what's wrong, what's already been tried, to person after person, as if none of them are speaking to each other, as if they're each encountering us for the very first time. This is my father. He has dementia. He lives in memory care. He hasn't urinated for hours. They couldn't catheterize him. No, he doesn't always feel pain like other people. Yes, he gets cold easily. Could you please? Every explanation chips away at something, his dignity, my patience, our time. I handed over a page from the memory care center with his medical contacts clearly printed at the top. The doctor looked at it, then looked at me. "I can't find his primary care physician." I pointed. "It's right there." She squinted, frowned slightly, and nodded, but I could tell she hadn't really looked. In another moment, a young lab tech came in to draw blood. I asked gently if she could also handle a special lab kit from the Mayo Clinic. She looked at the box like it was a foreign object. "Let me ask," she said. 20 minutes later, she returned smiling politely, having figured it out. I thanked her like she had saved the day, because in some small way, she had. Later, I stepped into the hallway, searching for a nurse. I just wanted to know what we were waiting for. No one made eye contact. They moved quickly, eyes averted, practiced in the art of seeming too busy to stop. When I finally caught someone, she sighed when I asked about the labs. "They're back. We're just waiting on the doctor for discharge." I asked hesitantly. Was a culture ordered too? Last time he had a clear urinalysis, but still had a bladder infection. She sighed again, louder this time, and walked away without a word. I stood there alone in the corridor of fluorescent light, and for a moment I felt invisible, like a page in a folder, like just another case on a long list. But the man waiting behind that curtain wasn't a case. He was my father, and I was tired of being the only one who seemed to remember that. Comic relief and dignity, enter Dr. Hugo. Just when I thought we had reached the breaking point, when even the fluorescent lights felt too bright and my father's silence too loud, a new figure stepped into the room. Dr. Hugo. He was older, maybe in his 70s, with kind eyes that twinkled behind his glasses and a walk that suggested he'd seen it all and still found reasons to smile. He wheeled in a small tray with instruments humming something that sounded like an old country tune. He didn't announce himself with clinical detachment. Instead, he greeted my dad with a cheerful, "Well now, I hear you're giving these young folks a hard time." Dad blinked, then chuckled, and for the first time in hours, I saw his shoulders drop just a little, not in defeat, but in relief. Dr. Hugo made jokes, light ones sprinkled in just enough to distract without mocking. "I hear you've got a touch of the old-timers," he said, once looking between Dad and me with a sheepish smile. Dad didn't laugh that time. Neither did I, but it was the only moment he misstepped. Everything else flawless. He talked through what he was doing without making it feel like a procedure. He cracked gentle jokes about cowboy hats and rodeo stars. He asked Dad about horses, and somehow, for 5 minutes, they were just two men talking about ranches and hay bales and the cost of oats these days. And then the catheter went in. Minimal yelling, minimal discomfort, just steady hands and a soothing presence. When he finished, he patted Dad on the knee and said, "You did better than most 20-year-olds I've worked on." "Don't tell them I said that." Dad grinned. "You a mechanic?" he asked. Dr. Hugo laughed. "Some days I feel like one." He left as quietly as he'd entered, leaving behind a working catheter, a calmer patient, and a room that somehow felt a little warmer. For the rest of the evening, Dad kept asking what his name was. When I reminded him, Dr. Hugo, he smiled and said I had an Uncle Hugo. Funny guy, drank too much, but man, he could dance. We both laughed, and in that laugh was something I hadn't felt all night. Lightness, the small wins, a hug, a thank you, a hand held. There's a kind of quiet that comes after the storm, not silence exactly, but a soft exhale, a room that no longer feels like it's bracing for the next crisis. That was us after Dr. Hugo left. Dad was tired, I was too, but the pain had eased, the chaos had settled, and in its place, there was space for something simple presence. I sat beside him again, brushing crumbs from the hospital blanket, tucking it gently around his shoulders. He still had the cowboy hat on, refusing to take it off, even if it meant he couldn't fully lean back. "Feels like me," he said. And I didn't argue. Every few minutes, he'd fidget, trying to sit up, saying we should go. I'd gently guide him back. "Let's wait until the doctor says it's okay." He'd nod agreeable, then ask again 2 minutes later. We played that loop 6 times. I answered every time like it was the first. It's in these loops that you learn what love really means. Not grand gestures, just patience. He looked at me. At one point, his brow furrowed in concern. "Did I take you away from something? Did you have plans tonight?" I hesitated, then smiled. Nothing more important than this. He reached for my hand, calloused fingers cool from the IV, but still strong in their own way, and squeezed it. "I'm glad you're here," he said quietly. "I love you every day. Not I love you, but I love you every day." It was different, more deliberate, as if somewhere inside, in the maze of memory and confusion, he knew he couldn't always show it. But tonight, here under these bright, humming hospital lights, he could say it, and he wanted me to know. I swallowed the lump in my throat, squeezed his hand back. "I love you too." Dad, every day. Outside, the night had fallen, but in that small, sterile room, we had found a flicker of warmth, a small win, and sometimes that's everything. Driving home, fatigue, fog, and an unspoken goodbye. The IV had finished its slow, steady drip. The labs were clear. The doctor signed the discharge papers with a quiet nod, and just like that, we were free to go. Except nothing about that night felt freeing. Dad was bundled under layers of hospital blankets, his body worn and still, except for his hands, one tugging at the cowboy hat to keep it straight, the other reaching every so often to touch the catheter bag now strapped to his leg. He didn't complain. He didn't resist. But the weight of it all hung heavy in the air between us. The nurse came in distracted, glancing more at the clock than at us. When I asked if she could help me get him dressed, she gave me a look I've seen before, somewhere between inconvenience and pity. I didn't push. I didn't explain that he needed a clean undergarment, that beneath that blanket was a body once strong, now dependent. I just helped him quietly, gently, like folding away a memory. Getting him into the car was harder than expected. The tubing, the fatigue, the sheer effort it took to lift each leg. I gave instructions slowly, like I was coaching a child. Left foot up, now hold here, lean back. He grunted, but never complained. And finally, we were moving back through quiet streets, past darkened windows, down roads we both once knew by heart. I wasn't wearing my glasses. My eyes were aching. The world outside was blurry headlights smeared into stars, stoplights glowing like distant suns. But I kept driving, hands tight on the wheel, because that's what you do when someone needs you to get them home. At his residence, a night nurse greeted us kindly. Dad hugged her like an old friend. Then he turned to me. "You coming in?" I shook my head. "Not tonight, Dad. You need rest." He looked down, then up. "Okay," he said softly. "Thank you for everything." And he hugged me. Not the kind of hug that's quick or automatic. The kind where someone holds on, really holds on, because words just won't do. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't have to. I watched him walk inside, slow and steady, a silhouette I knew by heart. And as I pulled away, the car silent, the world fuzzy and tired, I whispered to no one, "I love you, Dad, every day." Some stories don't have a dramatic ending. No big revelations, no perfect closure, just a tired drive home and a quiet hug goodbye. But in those small, ordinary moments, in the steady hand, the whispered thank you, the way we show up, even when we're exhausted, love writes its truest chapters. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever walked through a hospital hallway at midnight or held the hand of someone who once held yours, I hope you'll stay a little longer with me here. Please consider giving this video a like. It helps more than you know. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, raw, honest, and full of heart, I'd love for you to subscribe, because sometimes we just need to know we're not alone. Thanks for watching, and until next time, be gentle with yourself and those you love.